Well, every week we wonder, where's the double-digit underdog upset going to come from? I'm looking at Nashville this week, where Tennessee goes to Vanderbilt.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can get a big return. Yeah, you can. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get 150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. I'll pick every game in the SEC and look around the Group of 5 ranks as well. Opposite ends of the spectrum to some of college football, but guess what? The SEC is getting teams in the playoffs. So is the Group of 5. Far be it from me to forget that fact or forget my obligation to remind all of you. So Tennessee, why would I put them on upset alert this week? They're a 10.5-point favorite, according to our friends at FanDuel, going to Vanderbilt. Now, this is crazy. This is not a game anyone before the year would have picked as an upset alert. I don't think Vanderbilt has enough in the tank to win this football game. I think Vanderbilt has enough in the tank, or rather, Tennessee doesn't have enough to pull away from Vanderbilt and cover that number. They are on the road. Last week, the regular season. Now, here's the emotional or storyline components that don't apply here and why I think Tennessee still wins the game. The Vols don't have a look-ahead factor because they're not going to make the SEC championship game. The Vols have plenty to play for because if they win, sitting at the number 8 seed right now, or the number 8 ranking in the 12-team playoffs, I said they were a big winner, and they were coming out of the latest 12-team rankings. If Tennessee wins this football game, they're getting into the college football playoff. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if they lose this game, I'd have my money on they don't make the college football playoff. So there's plenty of urgency on the Tennessee side. Now, for Vanderbilt, you could look at this and say, well, this is their national championship. This is the biggest game of the year. Vanderbilt's already qualified for a bowl game. So they're just trying to pull an upset. They're just playing for the vibes, for the fun. So I don't think that edge is enough to put Vanderbilt over the top of Tennessee. We know Tennessee has a much more talented roster, but Alabama has a more talented roster than Vanderbilt. They lost on this field earlier this season. We saw Tennessee beat Alabama. Does that mean automatically that Tennessee isn't going to struggle? No, it doesn't. I think this is going to be a competitive football game, and it says more about the Vols and Nico Iamaleava. I have been waiting all season long for Tennessee to click in the passing game, to explode in the passing game, and they just haven't done. I don't care. I haven't even looked at the box score of what happened against UTEP because I do not care. If you go look at Tennessee's football stats for the year, they are inflated wildly by their non-conference competition. NC State, ranked at the time, Tennessee blew them out. I gave them full credit. I thought they'd win that game and cover, and indeed they did. But since SEC play has begun, here are Tennessee's point totals. 25, 14, 23, 24, 28, 33, that was against Mississippi State, 17, and now they play Vanderbilt. So no, I don't suddenly expect this is what the Tennessee offense is. That defense can win the Vols a national championship. No ifs, ands, or buts about that, because that defense is awesome. It's phenomenally good. And it's why they're going to win this game. Vanderbilt's not going to be able to score enough points. Tennessee has a better defense than Alabama, and Vanderbilt was able to go up and down the field when they needed to upset the Crimson Tide, and they were converting on 3rd down and 8, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 11, whatever they needed, they were able to get it. You're not going to do that against this Vols defense. So that's why Vanderbilt's upset is harder than it was going into the Alabama game, at least in retrospect, because I, like many others, thought Bama was going to win. I liked Vanderbilt to cover that spot. Didn't think they'd win the game outright. I think Vanderbilt can absolutely win this football game. But Tennessee has to really struggle. But here's the thing. They could. Tennessee is not blowing out anybody in conference play. They didn't blow out Kentucky. All right, they beat Mississippi State by 19 points. But they're not blowing anybody out. And don't look at Vanderbilt and just see that golden-ish I don't really know what color Vanderbilt's V is, but don't look at that logo and think, it's just Vanderbilt. It's just this. No, we passed that point a long time ago if you haven't been paying attention. So the reason I don't trust Tennessee to blow out Vanderbilt here is twofold. Number one, as I mentioned, I haven't seen the passing game click. In 5 out of the 11 games that Tennessee has played this year, Nico Iamaleava, who some people looked at as a Heisman dark horse coming into the season, that might be more of a 2025 proposition. It certainly is at this point in the year. But can you get him to a national championship game? Sure. With that defense, I've seen worse quarterbacks get him there. I mean, for goodness sake, just look in the SEC. Nick Marshall took Auburn to a national championship game. So yeah, wilder things have happened with regards to quarterbacks that aren't playing great, carrying a team all the way to a national championship game with defense, a running game, and just a little bit of magic. The Vols have been under 200 yards passing in 5 of the 11 games that they have played this season. That is shocking, unexpected. Didn't see that one coming. Even if you had faded before the season, whatever you thought Tennessee's passing game could be, you wouldn't have predicted that. Nobody would have predicted that. So they haven't been able to find it click there, which means what are they going to do? They're going to lean on Dylan Sampson in the running game. They're going to lean on the part of their offense that has been the most consistent this year. Well, what do you think Vanderbilt's run defense is this year? Do you think with the lower caliber athletes and the coaching staff, whatever it is at Vanderbilt, they've certainly saved their jobs? There was plenty of pressure, by the way, on Clark Lee coming into this year. Plenty of pressure as to, can they really get it done? Are they going to be good enough? Yeah, no, they made a bowl game, and that's almost as good as it gets at Vanderbilt. The best they've ever done. When James Franklin was there, he compiled back-to-back 8-win seasons. He won a couple of bowl games, consecutive 9-win years. They were ranked in the top 25. Vanderbilt did crack the top 25 at one point this year. They lost to LSU by 7 points last week on the road. They're coming back at home. They're getting 10.5 points in this spot. I do like them to cover, but I think Tennessee wins, in spite of Vanderbilt's run defense, which has given up 123 yards per game. That's a darn good number. Well, Spencer, have they played anybody? Has Vanderbilt? Well, last time I checked, Vanderbilt's playing in the SEC. They've won 3 of those games. Here are their opponents in SEC play: Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky, Texas, Auburn, South Carolina, LSU. Those opponents, combined with a potentially great rushing attack in Virginia Tech out of the ACC, with a handful of lower-level opponents, have managed 123 yards per game on the ground against Vanderbilt this season. It's been solid. It's done enough. So if they can lean into their strength and make Tennessee throw the football up and down the field, Vols have not shown that they can just throw it all over the yard in order to have a successful offensive attack. So I think the upset potential is real. I think this is a low-scoring game. I will take Tennessee to win. I am taking Vanderbilt and the points plus 10.5, 20-13. And once again, we see the Tennessee defense win the game for the Vols. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB. That is the handle, or at @LockedOn_CFB. DMs and mentions are wide open. What about the rest of the SEC? The Iron Bowl's this week. It's the lowest stakes Iron Bowl in quite a long time. I don't much care for that because the rivalry itself is beautiful and wonderful and fun to watch. And Auburn can absolutely pull the upset. That's coming up next. Right after we talk about FanDuel, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Plus, it's college football rivalry week. Do you want to bet on rivalry week? FanDuel.com, that's the place to do it. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And again, they've got college football up and down, left and right, diagonally this way, that way. They've got college football. And if you're a new customer, you can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Can Bama really go down this week? You bet your rear end they can. Oh, I don't think they will. Just to be very clear, Alabama at home versus on the road, different football team. Remember when they struggled with South Carolina? How does that game look right about now? That's a currently, though I don't think they should be, but they are currently top 15 team in the country, South Carolina, and, well, Bama found a way to get it done. So Auburn comes in this week, and these two teams, both of them, in some ways are mirror images of each other, in other ways are polar opposites. Alabama's on the precipice of 9-3, and you have got Crimson Tide fans calling into the Paul Feinbaum show and lamenting that Kalen DeBoer is the head coach and how the season's going. And look, I dubbed it earlier this week a failed first season. It absolutely is. If Auburn went 9-3, they might extend Hugh Freeze, and Auburn fans would jump for joy at the prospect of once again winning 9 football games. Auburn's got plenty to play for here. Not just a rivalry factor. They can't spoil anything directly for Alabama. It would have been more interesting had Alabama won last week at Oklahoma if Auburn had had that in the back of their minds of, hey, they're a playoff lock if they win this game, but if they lose, it's all up in the air. Bama could still make the playoff. They shouldn't. They really shouldn't. I've got Bama winning this game big, and here's why. Bama is coming back home. Kalen DeBoer off a loss. I trust that guy off a loss. I know Bama fans don't like him a whole lot right now because last week was embarrassing. I'm not telling you to not feel that way. I am telling you he knows how important this football game is. I think he's going to have his team ready. It's in Tuscaloosa. Auburn hasn't won there, and Auburn's up and down. Auburn's up and down all over the place. They have showed their real potential in the last couple of weeks, and Tigers fans are going, where was this the rest of the year? Well, not present. So you can't cry over spilled milk, which is what Auburn's football season is at this point. I've got Bama big, 28-10. Yeah, normally I wouldn't lay points in the Iron Bowl, but I'm going to do it here. Bama 28, Auburn 10. How about the game of the week in the SEC? It's not the Iron Bowl. It's Texas and Texas A&M. I have been hyping up, without, frankly, even hardly talking about the matchup a whole heck of a lot in this game. I have been talking about this matchup for a couple weeks here on the show. I can't wait for it to actually arrive. It's going to be phenomenally awesome. It's going to be one of the best environments, maybe the most hostile environment in the country this season. Here's what this game comes down to. How does Texas A&M's defense slow down the Texas offense? Or does the Texas offense slow itself down? Do they commit penalties? Do they fumble the football? Jaden Blue's had some problems this year. Is Quinn Ewers out of sync again? Are there Arch Manning questions? Is Arch Manning going to come in because Quinn Ewers gets hurt? A lot of questions on the Texas side. I don't have that many questions about Texas's defense, but I do think Texas A&M behind that home crowd is going to find a way to score some points. And Marcel Reed's just a tough guy to stop. So I'll take Texas A&M in the points, but Texas is the better football team here. 27 points for Texas A&M, 31 for Texas, though. I said that backwards. Don't really know why. Podcasting is just weird like that. 31-27. I think Texas beats Texas A&M. Ole Miss, you talk about lost seasons, disappointment, failure of a campaign. Yeah, Ole Miss, that absolutely qualifies. I can readily make the argument that Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin this year is a bigger failure than Alabama under Kalen DeBoer. Once the offseason fully rolls around, you'll probably hear me make that particular claim. But not today, because they still have to play the Egg Bowl. And when you have this many points, 26 to be exact, regardless of where the game is played, in a rivalry matchup, this would mean everything to Mississippi State. For Ole Miss, this means let's keep our slim playoff hopes alive, but understand that that's probably not going to happen. It should have. It didn't. Ole Miss 35. They're favored by 26. That's just a little bit too much. Ole Miss 35, Mississippi State 13. Jeff Levy's team next year, watch out for the Bulldogs. Next year, they're going to beat somebody that they shouldn't, or that you think they shouldn't anyway. LSU, Oklahoma. What is LSU playing for? Heck, what are either of these teams playing for? That's a really good question. That's a really good question. This is rivalry week, and you've got LSU playing Oklahoma. That's an SEC Big 12 matchup as far as I'm concerned, but this is a conference game now. Oklahoma's going to a bowl game. Yay, I guess. I mean, their bowl streak stays alive. That's something. LSU, they're going to a bowl game. It's not the one that they're going to like very much. LSU is favored by 7 at home, and guess what? Taking LSU. They played well enough to win against Vandy last week. I think Oklahoma left it all out on the field. At home, against Bama, a week ago, the field storming, emotional letdown spot, very real. This is not a rivalry week, take the points sort of deal because it's not an actual rivalry game. So I'm taking LSU 24, Oklahoma 10. That offense comes back down to earth. And remember, there's a defensive touchdown in that 24-3 win last week, and Jalen Milroe threw 3 picks overall. I think Garrett Nussmeier protects the ball at home. 24-10, LSU wins. Florida, oh boy. Oh boy. Florida plays Florida State. What did this game look like before the year? Florida can't win that game. Well, this is why you play out an entire season, because now it's an Uno reverse card, and Florida State can't win this game. Florida State, that's all there is to say. There's nothing left to say. It's all been said. Disaster, terrible, no good, very bad. Fired 3 coaches, an offensive defensive coordinator, an offensive line coach. They all deserve to be fired, quite frankly, with how the team performed this year. If Mike Norvell hadn't gotten a big contract extension, heck, he could have been deserving of a firing. But that's not the way the game gets played here. So Florida's going to win this game. Florida is feeling themselves, and I think Billy Napier values each and every single solitary win because he's buying back more and more credibility with the fan base. Rivalry or not, Florida's way better. Big win for the Gators, 38-6. Arkansas, Missouri, again in the, what's on the line? It's just kind of a game. Missouri is the worst 8-3 team in the country, by far. The fact that they're ranked annoys me like no end. Memphis should be ranked over Missouri at this point, to be frank with you. Both these teams are already going bowling. Missouri is at home. But guess what? I've been dogging on Missouri for too long for me to suddenly pick them in a game that they're playing against an opponent that's alive and not an FCS. So Arkansas 28, Missouri 24, I guess. Louisville plays Kentucky. That SEC aura, if you will, the SEC superiority, not going to show up here. Louisville's a better football team. They're not a great one, but they're still a good one. And Kentucky, not that good. And this isn't a game that's going to have huge ramifications for how strong the SEC is and what. But I'll just go back to the transitive property of, Kentucky beat Ole Miss, who granted wasn't good enough to make the SEC championship game. But still, Kentucky beat an SEC contender who beat Georgia. And Louisville is going to beat Kentucky here 27-17. I'm taking the Cardinals to win and cover in that spot. I'm not actually going to apply that logic. I'm just saying it could be thrown out there in a hypothetical world. Maybe. But Louisville, Kentucky, pretty underrated rivalry. Pretty low stakes in this one. Louisville's going bowling. Kentucky is not. I'll take Louisville by 10. Last couple of games in the ACC-SEC crossover that I mentioned on yesterday's show. But if you missed it, I will provide a brief summary recap, however you want to describe it here. Georgia plays Georgia Tech on Friday. Now, the quarterback situation for the Yellow Jackets is not good enough to scare Georgia here. Georgia Tech does like to run the football a lot. That is Brent Key's whole identity. They run a lot of fly sweeps. They'll run their quarterbacks. Aaron Philo, Haynes King, they'll go back and forth. At least they did last week against NC State. I think part of that is Haynes King not quite being at 100%, coming off the injury he suffered a few weeks ago. But can Georgia Tech hang around? Maybe for a little, but not for 4 quarters. Georgia is suddenly looking like an incredibly dangerous team who could win the SEC, who could get a first-round bye, and you look up and go, uh-oh. Did Georgia figure it out? Did they get Carson Beck to stop throwing interceptions? Well, they did. And it didn't have to be that way in the 12-team playoff because Georgia with 2 losses probably wouldn't have gotten in. Maybe they would have, but they'd have to win the SEC to do it. But this is the world we have, so I'm not going to stand on my soapbox any longer. Georgia wins, but Georgia Tech covers. 19.5 is the line. I think the Yellow Jackets will do just enough to cover. Just enough. Clemson, favored by 2.5 at home against South Carolina. Clemson, I think, has bigger national stakes in this game than does South Carolina on account of Clemson is ranked 12th. What happens when the number 12 team in the country picks up a top 15 win? I'm going to talk about this team more tomorrow, and that's Indiana. Indiana would really like South Carolina to win. You do not, in any way, shape, or form, want to mess around with a 10-2 Clemson team who lost in week 1. And that was so long ago, that doesn't even count. Let's overlook the Louisville game. Oh, look, they beat a top 15 South Carolina team. Well, that's what they've got. They're at home in Death Valley. I think Clemson wins. I think Clemson covers the 2.5 as well. Let me know your thoughts and any picks you might have in the YouTube comments below or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter, at @SMcLaughlinCFB or at @LockedOn_CFB. Those be the handles. We're going from the SEC to the Group of 5, bouncing around the college football world. And is Tulane in trouble? I'll give you a reason they could be. Don't know if they will be, though. That's coming up next. So when I tell you that Memphis could be brewing an upset here, it's rooted in one thing and one thing only. They haven't played a football game since November 16th. Yeah, that's right. So Memphis is off a bye. Tulane is playing their 6th consecutive football game here. Now, the last time such a discussion was brought up in a college football game that involved a top 25 team, it was Oregon going to Wisconsin. They were playing their 8th straight game. Wisconsin was at home, off a bye. Oregon was favored by 13.5, and Oregon won the game by 3 whole points. Just the 3 points. Now, the difference here, and a key one between those games, Tulane's at home. Tulane is at home in the cozy confines of New Orleans, a city I've always wanted to go to, by the way. Not just because Tulane has got a worthwhile football program, but it's one of the great food cities in America I've always wanted to visit. Hopefully I can cross that off my bucket list one day. But biggest matchup here is not an individual position group or an individual player. It's an entire side of the ball. And any one of those things can work to define a particular college football game. But in this one, I'm watching how the Tulane defense plays against this Memphis offense. When you've got extra time to prepare, that tends to favor the offense. And Seth Hennigan for Memphis this year, he's been good. Darian Mensah on the other side for Tulane rather, he's been good. Spam Risk giving me a phone call right now in the middle of recording my segment. The audacity of Spam Risk to not know what I'm doing and why it's important. So Tulane over its last 3 games against this Memphis offense, it's allowing 9 points per game. 9 points per game. Here are Memphis's point totals since beginning American Athletic Conference play. 21. Oh, that's not that good. 52, 33, 36, 27, 53. Yeah. They can move the football. They can really move the football. And when you talk about quarterbacks that are wildly underrated in college football this year, I hope Seth Hennigan's at the top of the list. I don't know if he can get an extra year of eligibility. He's a senior this season, but he's been really, really good. So Memphis is a 13.5 point dog. I'm definitely taking the points. Definitely taking the points. But John Sumrall, boy, does that guy have a case to be coach of the year in the American? Yes. Does he have a case to be coach of the year nationally? You can make that argument. What other coach in his first year can just take a handoff from Willie Fritz like a track race with a baton and seamlessly continue sprinting into first place? They're unbeaten in American Athletic Conference play. They're a 2-touchdown favorite for a reason. I do think Tulane wins the football game. I do. But I like Memphis to cover. I think the bye, the offense, Seth Hennigan and the way he's playing, I'm taking the Tigers here to win I'm taking Tulane to win the football game, but the Tigers to cover. Tulane 34, Memphis 24. But I tell you what, that's a game I am going to thoroughly enjoy watching this week. That game, by the way, I believe it's on a Friday. That game is on, beg your pardon. That's a Thursday game, hence why I'm talking about it today. I remember why I put things in my notes. Sometimes, maybe, every now and then. Okay, anyway, moving on. Let's talk about Boise State. So, Oregon State ordinarily would be due for an emotional letdown here because last week they played Washington State in the Pac-12 championship game. De facto, they're not actually giving a trophy for that game, but people will always remember that Oregon State pulled the upset 41-38 against a porous Washington State defense. They were able to get probably their biggest win of the year. Corvallis needed that victory in a big way. Now they have to go on the road to Boise. They're about a 20-point dog. Ordinarily, I'd say, emotional letdown spot. That's not going to go very well. And you know what? It might not. But I'll take Oregon State to cover because I think Oregon State did more than just win an important football game. I think they figured something out on offense. Now, the Boise State defense, better than Washington State. So Oregon State's not going to get into the mid to high 30s or low 40s in this particular matchup. But the Oregon State defense, you can't contain Ashton Jeanty. You can't stop him. You have to hope to contain him, but you can't even really contain him. You need to if you keep Ashton Jeanty under 200 yards, it could be an okay day for Oregon State. But I'll give them benefit of the doubt because the reason I think there's still a lot of drive and focus in that locker room is they're fighting for the culture, they're fighting for their head coach, Trent Bray, and they're fighting for bowl eligibility. And right now, for Oregon State, that means something. This was a 4-1 football team. A 4-1 that had lost 6 straight games and pulled the Washington State win out of the hat. So 35-20, I'll take Boise State to win. But Ashton Jeanty, against this Oregon State defense, He could be in for a day that really starts to pad his Heisman stats and propels him on the way to New York City, where I think he should be a finalist either way. But this is a game where his numbers, I think, are going to be very, very strong. And finally, last but certainly not least, in the Group of 5 race, do you know who's got something seriously on the line this week? UNLV. UNLV plays Nevada. And if they beat Nevada, UNLV gets the rematch that they sought in the Mountain West Championship game. A chance to play spoiler. A chance, by the way, to become a Group of 5 champion playoff team. UNLV, remember, is ranked in the top 25. They're outside the top 20. I believe the number 22 going into this week against Nevada, who's not a great team, but not as bad of a team as you probably thought coming into the year. They're currently sitting with 3 wins, and yeah, that's what they're going to end with, because UNLV is a much better team. They are at home, but UNLV is number 22. And do you know what the consideration is for the Mountain West Championship game if there is no head-to-head tiebreaker for them in Colorado State? They got some help from Fresno State last week. The answer is who's ranked higher. The first tiebreaker, if there's no head-to-head, is, well, who's ranked higher in the college football playoff rankings? Oh, that's UNLV, because Colorado State isn't ranked, nor will they be. So UNLV winning in. They've got everything to play for. Favored by 17.5. I think they win. I think they cover as well. I think this is a statement game for UNLV, and they carry all the momentum that they can going into that Mountain West Championship game against Boise State, where the rematch, boy, it's going to be fun. Recently had UNLV wide receiver Ricky White III on the show, and he has spoken about the strength of the culture in that UNLV locker room that Barry Odom has cultivated. It's going to draw attention, shall we say, in a good way, because players will say, hey, UNLV, that's a place where we can now get to the playoff. That's a place where we can win a conference championship. It's also going to draw attention from programs that have coaching vacancies. North Carolina. Just watch for it. I heard Josh Pate suggest it the other day on his show, and it clicked in my head as, yeah, I could absolutely see Barry Odom being a coaching candidate for North Carolina. I don't know that that's going to happen. I hope that distraction doesn't leak in. I hope UNLV gets the opportunity to play out this season for all it can be, because don't overlook the fact that if Tulane were to lose this week against Memphis, or if they were to lose in the American Conference Championship game against Army, UNLV would be the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion. The Big 12 champion would get the bye that they deserve. Under the rules, I don't like auto bids anywhere for any reason. I think they're completely and utterly ridiculous, but I digress. UNLV's path to getting into the playoff, it's just not that far-fetched. Beat Nevada, they're going to. Boise State doesn't even need to lose against Oregon State this week. That would help, but they don't have to do that. They just need, I don't know, Tulane to lose to either Memphis or Army. Do those things seem out of the realm of possibility? Well, they shouldn't. It's completely reasonable that could happen. I don't know that it will. Tulane is playing some good ball. Tulane is playing some really good football. Remember, they're up to number 17 in the rankings. So Tulane also, with plenty to play for, because they're looking for that fifth highest ranked conference champion spot. But what if they get the fourth? I don't know. I'm just saying. It's all out there. So those are the G5 games of the week. Hope you all enjoy. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.